This is going to be a good topic. I can already feel it. So welcome to another episode of Ryan on Gaming. This topic covers the hugely recently debated, huge kind of thing on the internet with PS4, Xbox One, new generation of consoles, is independent developers, indie games versus big AAA releases. You know the whole deal, right? Everyone's being a little whiny baby because there's more independent games being released, and you're seeing less AAA titles, bigger budget titles being released, retail releases, things like that. Now this video is going to cover, I guess, it's going to cover a number of things, but mostly it's like a whole versus scenario. Are we really seeing more indies over AAA? Is AAA really shrinking? Is it really going away? Are indies taking over? In a general sense, because I'm not sure how I'm even going to title this YouTube video yet, but it covers that basic idea between the two. Now, before we get into the whole meat of the conversation here and real talking points, let's preface this with a few things, which is the idea of indie games and the idea of the definition of an indie game. I think it's fair to say we can all agree on that the big kind of discussion and the problem a lot of people are having with indie games nowadays is not so much that they're just indie games, but a lot of downloadable titles in general. Because a lot of people seem to forget that the word indie means independent, as in the game is being published by the developer itself. There is no publisher for the game. And a lot of people get that word confused. Like, for example, Journey on PlayStation 3 is a fantastic, small-scale downloadable game, artistically approached. A lot of people would call that indie just because they think that's what, indie is, what it fits to, just small downloadable games. When Journey is not an independent game. It was published and funded by Sony. That is not an independent game. So you really have to get an idea of what indie means. So for this actual topic, it's not going to be covering just indie games, but downloadable titles. Because again, I think the real problem here that a lot of people are having is that you're seeing more downloadable games. Whether they are or aren't published, whether they are or not independently developed, the big talking point here is that you're seeing a lot of smaller scale downloadable games compared to bigger AA, AAA, big budget, retail released games. So now let's get into a comparison between PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 retail and digital releases versus PlayStation 4, Xbox One retail digital releases. PS4 and Xbox One only been on the market for 7 months, so we're also comparing only the first 7 months of releases on PS3 and 360 compared to PS4, X1. So, and I will be breaking down, the Metacritic scores of these games purely just to kind of give you an idea of, also, how good of games are we getting nowadays. I know some people get all uptight about using Metacritic, but I think it's the only fair way to really judge these games because that's multiple opinions of one single game. Because if I just use my opinion of what I think is good and bad, clearly you guys are going to be more angry about that. So if you don't like Metacritic, piss off because that's what we're using because I think it's the most fair thing. Anyway. Total PlayStation 3 retail releases, 52 games, 28 good games, 21 games considered like even, mediocre, and 3 bad games. 52 retail releases the first 7 months of the PlayStation 3. Total digital PlayStation 3 games, 22 titles, 5 good, 14 somewhat even, and 3 bad. That's 74 games on the PlayStation 3 you could have played within the first 7 months. Give or take a few titles. Who knows, maybe I miscounted. Keep that in mind with all these numbers. So now let's move on to the PlayStation 4. Total PlayStation 4 retail releases, 35 games, 19 of them considered good, 11 considered even, 5 considered bad. Total PlayStation 4 digital releases, so that's including all those indie games and maybe some that were published by Sony or what have you. 50 games in total, 23 good games, 23 even games, 4 considered bad games. In total, 85 PlayStation 4 games you could play up until right now, compared to 74 games on the PlayStation 3 in its first 7 months on the market. You've got more games, you've got more good games, despite how they're published, despite how much they're going to cost you, despite if they're a retail release or not. You're getting more good games. That's obviously a good thing to see. But absolutely, you're seeing less. You are seeing less retail titles, and you're seeing more digital. You're seeing vastly more digital, and you're seeing I wouldn't say that's vastly lower retail releases. 52 compared to 35. Come on, that's a little negligible, don't you think? You're certainly seeing less, but also keep in mind a lot of those PS3 retail releases, a lot of sports games. We don't see a lot of sports games nowadays. Only the heavy hitters like Madden and MLB The Show are really sticking around. Now for the Xbox 360, total 360 retail releases, 52 games, 30 good, 19 even, 3 bad. Total 360 digital titles, 12 good, 16 even, 0 considered bad from Metacritic. In total, that's 80 games on the Xbox 360. Same amount of retail games on the PS3, a lot more games digitally over the PS3. That's, because Microsoft, Xbox Live, they had XBLA, they had that whole initiative going. Compare this to the Xbox One right now. Total Xbox One retail games you can go out and buy. 42 games. That's 17 good, 18 even, 7 bad. 23 digital X1 games out right now. 10 good, 13 even, 0 bad. Compare that with the 360, you're even seeing a smaller difference in retail releases. For 360 you got 52 retail releases, X1 42 at retail. That's not bad at all. You're seeing less digital, but that number, the difference there is certainly not any huge argument to bring up. So very similar numbers. If there's one thing these numbers are actually proving and maybe offering, a discussion point, is just how Microsoft and Sony operate. Whereas, Microsoft, you see less digital releases because, they're kind of having a tough time right now getting developers and publishers on that platform because they've been having, a rough PR campaign and everything. We know the X1's current issues. And you can obviously see from Sony's point of view, they had a really rough PlayStation 3 launch, so clearly not many people were on board developing for that system. And, PlayStation 4, obviously there's a crap load of downloadable titles because we know that's Sony's current initiative. They've been working closely with independent developers, sending out dev kits, helping them, helping them fund their games, maybe asking for just timed exclusivity. That's why you're seeing those numbers. But certainly, decrease in retail titles, but it's certainly not what people are making it out to be. Now, I know one big talking point that a lot of people are going to bring up right now about these numbers is how many of these games are ports. They want to bring in exclusives. Why would I buy one system over the other? That's not necessarily the point. The topic of conversation is about retail versus digital. But if you actually want to talk about exclusives versus ports and all that, well, let me tell you this right now. All those games are the first 7 months of PS3, 360, PS4, and X1, all those platforms, guess what? Most of those titles are ports. The majority of those titles are ports. Very few of all those games for PS3, 360, PS4, X1, the first 7 months are ports. Why are they all ports? Because they're new platforms for 7 months on the market. They also have previous platforms. A lot of 360 and PS3 games were ports from PS2 games and Xbox games. So the majority of PS3 360 titles, were also ports on top of PS4's indie games that are also available on PC. I know that's going to be something people are going to bring up, but sorry, they're all majority ports because these platforms are new. Anyway, here's a better idea. Here's a better kind of look at, maybe we can get a talking point out of this, which is, we can't, 7 months is kind of a good way to judge, but not necessarily because, again, there's a lot of ports in there. You don't know how well the system's going to do over a period of time. So now that we've compared the first 7 months, which really didn't show us that good of numbers, let's compare the install base to certain platforms, right? Now, the Xbox, PlayStation 2, and GameCube. These are systems that did not have digital distribution. They did not have ways to download DLC and downloadable games. But let's look at their retail releases. Xbox had an install base of 24 million systems. It had roughly 999 games released for the system. That's all retail games, $50 games, of course varying budgets, but what we're getting at is retail versus digital, because clearly there's much different budgets between those two games. Or between those two types of games. PlayStation 2, biggest install base, the world's biggest install base of any game platform, 155 million systems sold. There are 3,870 PlayStation 2 games. Now, clearly, PS2, a bit of an elephant in the room here, doesn't necessarily apply to our conversation because, you do see, it had, at that point in time, it had a monopoly on the market pretty much. 150 million compared to 24 million by its second place competitor is nothing. So clearly you're going to see a lot of games there. GameCube had an installed base of 21 million systems. There was a number of 648 GameCube games. Now again, similar number to the Xbox. 300, around 300, 400 less games. Nintendo had a tough time getting a lot of third parties to develop games on the GameCube. It did have the lowest install base of that generation. That might explain why. But now let's compare the PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, and Wii. Digital distribution systems that did have downloadable games. The PlayStation 3 had an install base of 82 million systems, much more than, say, the Xbox and GameCube, and it had only around 795 PlayStation 3 games released. Now, what's going on here? Shouldn't more systems in the market mean more games? Not necessarily. Xbox 360 install base, 82 million systems in the market, just a nudge under PlayStation 3's install base. They're both at 82 million right now as of recording this. There's 1,121 Xbox 360 games. Now, of course, 360 might have more games because at the time it had a year head start on the PlayStation 3. A lot of games never got it ported over. 360 had a lot of exclusives. It had a lot of console exclusives, and even if the game was also available on PC, 360 was easier to develop for. There was a lot of reasons to choose 360 over PS3. Then Nintendo Wii had the biggest install base of the previous generation, 101 million systems in the market with 1,222 games. Now, really, when you look at PS3, 360, Wii, of course there's different numbers in terms of retail releases, but they're really not that far off. I mean, the only one that really proves there was a vast difference was the Xbox, PS2, GameCube generation, and the only reason why you saw that huge difference with the PS2 is because it had a monopoly on the market. There was no monopoly for 360, PS3, and Wii. So that's why you're seeing not vastly different numbers. But compare them to their previous generation of Xbox, PS2, and GameCube. But clearly the PlayStation 3, Wii, and Xbox 360 sold much more than the Xbox and the GameCube, but they really did not release that much more games at all. Now, why is this a talking point for digital versus retail? Because the clear-cut answer is, as technology improves, as games become more complex, you're going to see a decrease in retail releases because budgets are higher for these games. And why do you see independent developers doing better nowadays? Why do you see smaller scale digital downloadable titles being so prosperous nowadays? Free-to-play games that maybe don't have a big budget, because that's what they are. They don't require a big budget. They are smaller scale games that don't require nearly as big of a budget as the next Call of Duty, the next Battlefield, the next Watch Dogs, the next Last of Us. In fact, the reason why those games, those games that I just named continue to exist and continue to get made is because they're the big names in the industry that can sell that many units. A lot of the titles that you see disappearing nowadays is like those, like what I mentioned earlier, a lot of sports games that, just can't live anymore. Or maybe some random racing games that just can't make it anymore. Random platformers that just can't make it anymore in today's market. The market's a vastly changing thing. Gaming has certainly changed from how many years ago. Maybe even all the things I'm saying now isn't necessarily completely valid, because again, the market has changed so much, which is why you're seeing more independent developers, more downloadable titles, and you're seeing less retail. But I think it's fair to say you're not even seeing that much less retail. We're still getting a lot of big budget titles here. I mean, come on, with the numbers I've provided you, you're really not seeing a lot less, especially when you compare Xbox, PS2, GameCube generation to PlayStation 3, Xbox 360. It's literally like the same amount of releases, just a little bit less, and it's really negligible if you even felt that, because at the end of the day, you didn't buy every one of these games, right? Everybody has their own taste, and everyone buys different games, right? I think I shouldn't have to tell you that. So clearly, not everybody's going to buy every single game, and everybody's going to have a different collection at the end of the day. Some people buy games and sell them. You see what I'm getting at. You see what I'm getting at. What it really is all about is, when it comes down to personal preference and what kind of games you like. Because the whole reason why this talking point came up is because so many people are bitching and complaining about all these downloadable titles. Yes, there is less retail releases because games are becoming so much better looking. They require bigger budgets, and you've seen all the headlines recently. Developers going under, people getting laid off, publishers selling off all their assets. It's tough. It's tough to stay in this industry, but it still produces a lot of money, and a lot of better names can still stay in. And if anything, I guess if there's any good way to look at it, it's that bad games can't live in the industry anymore, and only good games can. I guess even more cynical people will say, "Oh, modern games suck, and all the games today suck anyways," or whatever. Be a little baby about it, but at least that's how I would see it. Is you're seeing a lot of really good games that can make it nowadays in today's market. But again, it is a tough market. It is a tough market. It's a tough industry, so that is why you're seeing a lot of people go under. But it's not. Again, it's not that much less retail. You're just seeing downloadable titles be more prevalent and have more relevance, and that's fine. Let them be in this industry, because maybe that one little independent developer can make, have a small budget, work out of his basement or what have you, make a great game, produces a lot of money, and then they have the money they need to produce a AAA title. You never know what can happen. If there's just one last thing I can say about this topic, it's that give downloadable games a go, man. You'll be surprised. There really are some damn good games out there. Have an open mind, dude. That's why they sell, and that's why they make money, because some of them are actually pretty damn awesome. So maybe be more open. But if they are not your thing, then don't buy them. There's still retail games out. Anyway, I think that about does it for me. I probably missed some talking points that I wanted to bring up. This always happens with me in these bigger videos that require more conversation and more talk and more hard numbers. I always end up editing these things, and I'm like, oh my god, I left out that one thing. So I think I got everything. But that concludes this episode of Ryan on Gaming. Thank you so much for watching, and hopefully talking with me in the comments like I know you're going to. And I'll see you all in my next video. Take care. And I mean that. I'm dead serious. I worry about you. Don't go out too late. Don't drink and drive. Use protection.